Hi everyone, it's Katrina. The Triassic Kraken. The colossal squid is one of the most mysterious creatures in the world, rarely seen in its natural habitat of the deep ocean. It's the largest invertebrate on the planet, and it also has the largest eyes of any living animal. Its eyes are even bigger than the eyes of a blue whale. Everything scientists know about the colossal squid comes from happenstance, even being such a huge monstrosity. They've primarily found their bodies washed up on the shore, or beaks in the stomachs of other animals. A few specimens have been captured in deep-sea fisheries, but biologists have never managed to effectively study a fully grown adult in its natural habitat, which is in the extreme depths of Antarctica. The best guess scientists have is that the colossal squid grows to about 46 feet in length with a weight of 1,100 pounds. Scientists know colossal squids fight sperm whales because of the vicious scars discovered on whale bodies. If a monster like the colossal squid can exist in the world while rarely being seen by humans, it lends credibility to other sea monsters being alive too. For example, the Triassic Kraken. The Triassic Kraken is a hypothetical creature based on huge suction cup prints found in fossil beds in Nevada. The cup prints were found alongside a gigantic beak. Based strictly on this scant evidence, scientists believe the Triassic Kraken was over double the size of a colossal squid. Because the suction cup marks were found near the shattered bones of a huge Shortfaced skeleton, researcher Diana Schultz suggested the Shortfaced was prey. Further research revealed a graveyard of Shortfaced remains. With so many skeletons, Schultz and her colleagues came up with a theory for how they got there. They believe the Shortfaced were consumed by an extremely intelligent and biblically enormous cephalopod. The researchers estimated the Triassic Kraken was at least 100 feet long. Sadly, no additional evidence has ever been found to suggest the creature was real. Some think it could still be alive, or at least some version of it, a bigger and scarier version of the colossal squid. The Stegosaurus. Out of all the rumors of dinosaurs that have supposedly been spotted in Africa and South America, there are never any tales about a Stegosaurus being found. Yet there is a very strange piece of evidence to suggest the dinosaur was living in Cambodia as little as 1,000 years ago. Every day, thousands of tourists flock to Siem Reap to visit the temples at Angkor. It's a majestic temple complex in the middle of a wild jungle, built by the Khmer kings in the 12th and 13th centuries. It is the largest religious complex in the world, abandoned long ago. There are trees growing through the historical buildings, and if it weren't for the tourists, Angkor would be an empty shell of stone and overgrown weeds. One of the most important buildings in Angkor is Ta Prohm. It's not far from the most famous structure in the whole place, Angkor Wat. History tells us that Ta Prohm was built by King Jayavarman VII sometime in the 1100s. Everything about the temple is ordinary except for one feature. Amidst the typical Khmer architectural stylings is a bizarre carving of a Stegosaurus. The carving is only about the size of a human hand. It's located in a quiet corner of the temple, almost invisible, covered in the thick roots of the banyan trees, which move like snakes on the stone walls. There is no mistaking the Stegosaurus carving for any other animal. It's not an unusually shaped elephant. It isn't a wild boar or a tiger. It is without a doubt a Stegosaurus, complete with plated spines on its back. But what does it mean? The carving was made around 900 years ago. That was way before paleontology existed, and long before scientists started digging up fossils. Even if the ancient Khmer had somehow found the fossilized remains of a Stegosaurus, it's unlikely they would have known what it looked like while alive. The carving shows a Stegosaurus as it was 150 million years ago. The carving is not necessarily in an important place. It's very small, blending in with the rest of the decorations on the side of the temple. There is another creature below it that looks like a monkey. Whoever carved the Stegosaurus must not have thought much of the animal, meaning it wasn't that important or special. Could that mean that there were a lot of them? Could there have been Stegosaurus roaming around in abundance like deer? There are a few theories that experts have used to explain the carving. There's the whole fossil thing, so it seems unlikely. Many maintain that the carving was made recently as a hoax. Another popular explanation is that the image shows a rhino standing in front of a palm tree. The palm tree's fronds are mistaken for the spade-shaped blades on the Stegosaurus's spine. What do you think is the most logical explanation here? Do you believe the Khmer Empire had dinosaurs roaming around in the jungle? Or is it just a rhino with a palm tree? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And now for number 6. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Zion Foster and your lovely wife for supporting this channel. Thanks, you guys! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about prehistoric creatures. The giant short-faced bear. During the days of woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, there was a terrifying predator that doesn't get enough attention these days. It was the giant short-faced bear, competing for food with other ferocious beasts of the Ice Age. Beasts like the American lion and the dire wolf. Then again, scientists think it most likely didn't have to compete that much. The giant short-faced bear was so ridiculously big and powerful that even the formidable American lion would have stepped out of its way. Modern science says the bear went extinct 11,000 years ago. But there are those who believe it could still exist in the northern reaches of Canada, Alaska, and Siberia. The belief is based on a seemingly endless list of historical sightings. Just take a look at the legend of Berman's bear. It's the name for a mythical creature that terrorized the indigenous population on Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula centuries ago. Locals described the enormous bear as looking just like a brown bear, except way more intense. It was far more dangerous and so big that it could rip an entire village to shreds. In Siberia, the bear is believed to still be around somewhere in the wilderness. In 1920, zoologist Sten Bergman came into possession of a pelt supposedly taken from the carcass of one such bear. He believed it belonged to an undiscovered species of brown bear, one far larger than anything local. 100 years later, modern researchers think that Sten Bergman had a giant short-faced bear pelt. The crummy part is that nobody knows where the pelt went. There have been other sightings of strange bears, like the one in 1864. An enormous bear with odd yellow fur was killed in northern Canada. Its body was sent to the Smithsonian Institution, where zoologist Clinton Hart Merriam labeled it a new species. Modern scientists think the Canadian bear was a mix between a polar bear and a grizzly bear, not an example of an extinct creature. But there are those who admit it's possible a few giant short-faced bears survived in remote Russia until this century. The giant sloth. 10,000 years ago, some of the coolest mammals that ever existed dropped abruptly off the face of the earth. The dire wolves went extinct, the saber-toothed tigers, and the giant sloths. Most people today are familiar with the cute three-toed sloths that live in trees. But before the Ice Age ended, the world was familiar with giant sloths so big they could shake trees. And they definitely weren't as cute as the ones today. The largest of all the giant sloths was a creature called Megatherium americanum, which translates to something like the giant beast from America. It's a suitable name because the giant sloth weighed about 4 tons and stood 20 feet tall. It wasn't as big as the bigger dinosaurs, but it was still one of the largest creatures alive during the Ice Age. It used its reach to pull leafy branches down to its mouth. Then it scraped off the leaves using its huge, curved claws. The giant sloth first evolved in South America, living in the primeval forests of the Amazon. Over many thousands of years, it slowly grazed across the grasslands and made its home in the human-free woodlands of North America. But then, things started to go wrong. The climate became warm and wet, the forest grew thicker, and humans arrived. Suddenly, the giant sloth didn't have enough food to eat. Plus, it had become a part of the prehistoric human food menu. In Argentina, archaeologists have found proof of giant sloths being butchered by humans. Proof in the way of giant sloth bones with the markings of human tools. Also, entire dumping grounds where humans left the sloth skeletons when they were done with them. This was around 12,600 years ago. Researchers say the giant ground sloth is dead and gone. But for the past few centuries, people have been seeing one in the jungles of South America. Locals call it the mapinguari. It's a mythical beast that perfectly matches the description of an extinct giant sloth. Though to be fair, the tales might be embellished a little bit. Amazonians claim mapinguari is 9 feet tall and has curved claws. These features match up with the giant sloth. but then they say it has backward feet and a huge mouth on its belly like a nightmarish creature. Mapinguari also gives off a scent of putrid stench, so rancid that people who smell it get sick. Scientists don't know what the giant sloth smelled like, but it couldn't have been that bad. It also likely didn't have a giant mouth on its belly like an evil kangaroo pouch. The stories about Mapinguari also say that it's a carnivore, devouring whole herds of cattle. But the ground sloth was an herbivore. Maybe it's a legend that coincidentally matches the description of the extinct ground sloth. Or maybe it's a ground sloth that's been turned into myth. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. The Plesiosaur. Researchers have made a very special discovery involving the ancient aquatic reptile called the Plesiosaur. This ancient dinosaur-like monster was believed to live strictly in saltwater. But according to a new study by scientists at the University of Bath, that wasn't the case. The Plesiosaur also lived in freshwater. The discovery has renewed interest in the Loch Ness Monster, which millions of people believe is in fact a dinosaur, or a marine reptile. Paleontologist Nick Longrich, who was part of the research team, said plesiosaurs were able to exploit freshwater environments. They could move from oceans into lakes with relative ease. Bones discovered across various locations have proved that the plesiosaur spent a significant amount of its life in fresh water. It's one of those groundbreaking finds that completely changes everything scientists know about a particular animal. It also helps the myth of Nessie. The whole thing about the Loch Ness Monster is that people believe it's a dinosaur that got trapped in the lake. Over millions of years, Nessie's ancestors survived in an isolated pocket in the Scottish Highlands. It's a sound theory from a logical standpoint. If you think about it, it does make sense. Plus, the Loch Ness Monster does look exactly like an extinct plesiosaur. Nessie has 4 paddle-like arms, a long serpentine neck, and a plump body. The creature looks identical to the aquatic terror that lived 66 million years ago. But there are a few problems. The first problem is that the plesiosaur went extinct with the rest of the dinosaurs when the Earth was struck by an asteroid. The second big problem is science itself. Loch Ness formed 10,000 years ago during the Ice Age. Unless Nessie survived in a chunk of ice for thousands of years, then thawed into the newly formed loch, it's an impossibility. Maybe Nessie is a dinosaur, but experts don't think so. The Brontosaurus. In 1985, Disney released a movie called Baby, Secret of the Lost Legend. It was about a paleontologist who discovers a family of Brontosaurus living in secret on the Ivory Coast. In the movie, the villain is a ruthless professor who wanted to take credit for discovering the dinosaurs. That evil villain was based on a real, and also rather villainous, scientist from the University of Chicago. His name was Roy P. McCall, and he tried to find a Brontosaurus in the Congo. Roy went on 2 expeditions in the 1980s to find living dinosaurs in Africa. He believed wholeheartedly in cryptids, creatures like Bigfoot, Yeti, and the Loch Ness Monster. It was also his personal opinion that megafauna from the Ice Age, believed extinct, still lurked in the remote parts of the world. Roy thought that if he could track down some of these strange creatures, he might find the missing evolutionary link between humans and monkeys. This wasn't even in the Victorian era when pseudoscience was all the rage. It was only around 40 years ago. Rumors of a Brontosaurus in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been around ever since Europeans arrived in West Africa. There have been plenty of explorers who have gone in search of evidence of the creature, but none have ever found it. Still, locals in the deep jungle speak of a long-necked dinosaur that lives in total seclusion. It's so big that it can flatten a mob with 1 foot. The description given to Europeans of the creature in the jungle matches exactly with a Brontosaurus. The interesting part is that they wouldn't have had any way to know about long-necked dinosaurs. People living simple lives deep in the jungle weren't exactly busy with paleontology in the 19th century. How would they have cooked up a story about a sauropod? What would the point of it even be? Roy McCall's obsession with the African dinosaur ruined his life. He had tenure at the University of Chicago, so he couldn't be fired, but he was condemned as a hack and a fraud. His work on cryptozoology appeared in prestigious works like the New York Times. He became more of a monster hunter than a scientist. Roy McCall died in 2013 at the age of 88. Still frustrated, he never found the legendary dino. The woolly mammoth. The Siberian taiga is one of the most remote places on this planet. You can travel hundreds of miles in any direction and never come upon another human being. It's a vast territory of nothingness, a great place for creatures from the Ice Age to go undetected. Many of the people who do call the Siberian taiga home believe there are herds of mammoths living in the frigid wilderness. Stories of mammoth sightings have been circulating for nearly a century. It started in the 1940s. In World War II, military pilots were flying over the dense, snowy forests. They occasionally spotted great beasts. One pilot in particular is believed to have started the rumor about a small herd of mammoths wandering through the snow. The pilot said the animals may not have been woolly mammoths, but definitely looked like hairy elephants. In 1978, something similar happened in the region of Yakutia. A group of locals near the Indigirka River witnessed a dozen mammoths slurping water early in the morning. Then they wandered off into the density of the woods and were gone. Scientists are skeptical at best. Nikita Zimov, a Russian ecologist who's been trying to revive the natural habitat of mammoths, doesn't think a single one still exists. It's his ultimate dream to see mammoths walk the earth again, though he suspects it will be because of cloning, not a secret herd. Nikita said mammoths in Eurasia went extinct 9,000 years ago. He believes they were completely wiped out by Ice Age hunters. But there was a small group of the animals that remained until much more recently than people think. 3,380 years ago, there were still mammoths living on the remote Wrangel Island. But then they died, never to be seen again. And while it's true that the Siberian taiga is a vast expanse of empty wilderness, it isn't exactly unexplored. Over the past 300 years, people have trekked across the extensive taiga over and over again. If there was a herd of mammoths, someone would have seen them. But they did, didn't they? In the 1940s and 1978. That's 2 sightings in 40 years, suggesting there is a rogue herd of mammoths. They have been seen by people, it's just that scientists don't accept the sightings as legitimate. Maybe if someone had taken a photograph or a video, then we would have proof that ancient creatures are still around. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Galagadon. This ancient shark had teeth in the form of an alien spaceship. This prehistoric freshwater shark was called Galagadon nordquiste, named after the 1980s video game Galaga for its tiny alien-like triangular teeth. Did any of you play this game? Do you know what I'm talking about? This shark lived around 67 million years ago and was found by retired chemist and volunteer Karen Nordquist right next to the famous remains of Sue the T-Rex. Remember her? This is the most complete Tyrannosaurus rex skeleton ever found. At less than 2 feet long, Galagadon was a small shark with millimeter-wide teeth that were good for crushing, with each measuring the diameter of just a pinhead or a grain of sand. That is really small. It likely fed on creatures like snails and crawdads. In the words of the Field Museum's curator of dinosaurs and study co-author Pete McCovakey, it's not exactly Jaws. Lol, but it's still cool. Galagadon probably had camouflage-like coloring, much like its living relative, the bamboo shark, according to McCovakey. Discoveries of smaller species like this help researchers learn more about what the world was like during the time of the T-Rex and how the North American freshwater ecosystem evolved during a part of the Cretaceous period before avian dinosaurs went extinct. All these pieces of the puzzle can help us better understand the mass extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs. Fidus. The primitive eel-like Fidus shark genus lived 360 million or more years ago during the late Devonian period. Last October, an international team of researchers announced the discovery of the first nearly complete Fidus shark skeleton in Morocco's Anti-Atlas Mountains. The find was especially significant because sharks are made of cartilage. Because of this, their skeletons are typically very poorly preserved, leaving scientists with little more than their teeth to figure out the rest of them. Before the discovery, researchers only had fossils of the shark's 3 cusped teeth, so they didn't know much about what it looked like. Now they know that the long, skinny creature grew up to 4 feet long and had a long snout. It may have resembled the strange-looking frilled shark that exists today. Fidus's teeth also looked like that of its distant modern relative. They were conical and pointed inward and were ideal for capturing and swallowing prey whole, unlike most modern sharks who have serrated teeth for shredding. The ancient genus went extinct during the early Carboniferous period. It seems to scientists as if millions of years passed before its physical characteristics reappeared in creatures like the frilled shark. Does this mean that prehistoric sharks may have survived all of this time unnoticed? Probably not. In the words of paleontologist John Mazey of the American Museum of Natural History, we are experiencing a renaissance of anatomy. Considering how little researchers know about both Fidus and the frilled shark, it may be a while before they can explain the apparent re-emergence of ancient body parts. Scaleless shark. Considered the first true shark, the extinct Cladosalaki genus lived around 380 million years ago in Europe and North America during the late Devonian period. Also called the scaleless shark, it retained several characteristics of its ancestors, including a fish-like head with a short, rounded snout, 7 gills instead of 5, and a longer, less muscular body than modern sharks. This small, 4-foot-long predator had broadly attached pectoral and pelvic fins, making it fast but less maneuverable than larger sharks. Perhaps most strikingly, it had thin, fragile skin that lacked scales and dentical armor plates. Its only scales were in the mouth cavity, around the eye, and along the edges of its fins. Scales protect sharks against injuries and provide a firmer attachment for swimming muscles by strengthening the skin. Some scientists think that an absence of scales gave the genus the advantage of speed, which was the best defense against the ocean's most ferocious predators at the time, most likely Dunkleosteus. Remember him? The fish covered with armor plates? Is it better to be slower with thicker skin or faster with thin skin? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. The scaleless shark also lacked claspers, the reproductive organ that today's sharks use for transferring sperm into a female's body. It even lived alongside sharks who had developed these organs. At a lack for definitive evidence, scientists are unsure how these creatures procreated, so this creature remains quite the mystery. Scapanorhynchus. Scapanorhynchus means spade snout and is an extinct shark genus that dwelled in what is now the Atlantic Ocean and perhaps worldwide from the early Cretaceous period and possibly into the Miocene. It looked much like the modern-day goblin shark with its long, flat snout that protruded far past its jaw and its sharp, pointed teeth. The resemblance is so uncanny, scientists once considered reclassifying Scapanorhynchus into the goblin shark's genus. They ultimately decided not to, as the two are distinctive enough to represent their own category. The smallest Scapanorhynchus species measured around 26 inches, and the largest was up to 10 feet long. Most species were on the smaller end of the spectrum, with the larger ones reaching about the size of a goblin shark. The largest Scapanorhynchus tooth ever found measured 2.76 inches. Its snout was probably equipped with electroreceptive sensors called ampullae, which would have been used for detecting nearby fish. This feature, which is characteristic of deep-dwelling species, comes in handy for hunting in the dark, where traditional eyesight is essentially useless. Scapanorhynchus's tail fin was much larger than that of the goblin shark. The tail's upper lobe was much bigger than the lower one, suggesting that although it was a predator that easily ripped its prey's flesh, the prehistoric shark hunted passively and wasn't a strong swimmer. Anvil Shark. Nicknamed the Anvil Shark and the ironing board shark, this extinct prehistoric shark genus is most recognizable by its anvil or ironing board-shaped dorsal fin. If it weren't for that, it would look like many modern sharks today, but that bizarre fin separates them from the bunch and was also covered with rough, tooth-shaped scales or spikes, along with a matching patch on their snout. Since it seems to have only been found on males, it's most likely it had to do with finding a mate, or maybe to look scarier. Perhaps both. Stegosaurus dwelled in coastal waters off China, Russia, North America, and Europe from 360 to 340 million years ago, during the late Devonian and early Carboniferous periods. It was between 2 and 3 feet long and weighed 10 to 20 pounds. Like many modern sharks, it fed on fish and cephalopods. While its strange anvil-shaped fin made it quite impressive, compared to a human it wasn't very big, so while it may have looked fierce, it was probably kind of cute. In 1982, a very well-preserved specimen of this shark was found in Scotland. Known as the Bearsden shark fossil, it is one of the best preserved shark fossils in the world. The Crusher Shark. Tychodus mortoni, or the crusher shark, is an extinct genus that lived between 100 and 85 million years ago. Why is it called the crusher shark? Because it had 1,000 teeth which it used to pulverize shelled animals. It was one of the largest sharks of the late Cretaceous period and was one of the largest ever shellfish-eating animals. Unlike many, if not most sharks who have sharp teeth designed to shred flesh, the crusher shark used its teeth for devouring barnacles and large clam-like organisms. The fossil record indicates that it lived primarily in waters off Canada, Mexico, and the US, although evidence suggests that its presence was worldwide. Newly discovered fossils were recently found in Kansas. A 2009 study led by paleobiologist Kenshu Shimada proposed that the Sterophagus, or shell-crushing shark, was 36 feet long or more, putting it around the size of modern basking and whale sharks. Just the jaw alone was almost 3 feet long. The Jinsu Shark. Cretoxyrina lived throughout the world's waterways between 100 and 75 million years ago during the Middle to Late Cretaceous. Known more commonly as the Jinsu Shark, it was one of the largest sharks of its time, growing over 24 feet long and weighing between 1,000 and 2,000 pounds. Comparable in size to today's great white. Despite living alongside the dinosaurs, the Jinsu shark was among the late Cretaceous period's most fearsome predators. It feasted on other large sea creatures, including marine reptiles called mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, and Xiphactinus, a hellacious giant bony fish. Scientists learned much of what they know about prehistoric sharks, including this one, by studying the creature's teeth, as well as the teeth imprints left behind in the bones of their prey. The Jinsu shark's teeth were smooth, curved, sharp, and over 2 inches long, and it had an incredibly powerful bite. These characteristics are what earned the genus its name, after the Jinsu knife advertised in infomercials during the late 70s and early 80s, and which its sellers claimed was sharp enough to cut through tin cans. Scissor-toothed shark. The Adestus, or scissor-toothed shark genus, lived between 330 and 300 million years ago during the late Carboniferous period. For a long time, scientists were stumped by its bizarre tooth configuration. The scissor-toothed shark was a member of a poorly studied strange order of cartilaginous fish called Eugenodontida, who had large, often spiral-like sets of teeth, unlike anything seen in today's animal kingdom. Adestus possessed vertically aligned triangular teeth that resembled pinking shears, set into a curved jaw called a whorl. It did not use these teeth like scissors. On the contrary, the scissor-toothed shark's chompers coiled away from each other toward the front of its jaws, with only a few back teeth that were able to slide past each other and shred prey. This bizarre predator did not shed teeth. Instead, its old teeth protruded from its mouth as it continuously grew new ones. Recent research carried out by Idaho State University paleontologist Leif Tapanilla and his colleagues may have finally solved the age-old mystery of how the scissor-toothed shark used its teeth. Acting on the previously proposed theory that the creature slashed up and down at its prey, the researchers created a 3D model of its head using teeth, jaw, and skull fossils and a CT scan machine. They discovered that the shark had 2 joints in its jaw, enabling it to clamp down on its prey, thereafter moving its teeth back and forth to saw its victim. As far as scientists know, Adestus was the only shark to feed using this bite-and-slice technique. The Buzzsaw Shark. The extinct shark-like Helicoprion genus is related to the scissor-toothed shark and existed as far back as 290 million years ago during the early Permian period. It was incredibly large, reaching between 20 and 25 feet long. This prehistoric creature is also known as the Buzzsaw Shark for its distinctive jaw and tooth assembly, which is unlike that of any other known creature that ever existed. For over a century after Russian geologist Alexander Petrovich Karpinski first coined the term Helicoprion in 1899, scientists struggled to understand how it used its circular blade-like tooth whorl. In fact, they weren't even sure where the apparatus was located on the creature. Karpinski's best guess was that it was on the shark's nose, while other researchers speculated that it was in the lower jaw, dorsal fins, or even deep in the throat. Part of the reason for this confusion was the lack of a well-preserved Helicoprion specimen, aside from the whorl itself. So what the heck did it look like? A 2013 study published in the journal Biology Letters finally set the record straight. Idaho State University paleontologist Leif Tapanilla and student Jesse Pruitt, along with artist Ray Troll, re-examined the Idaho Museum of Natural History's Helicoprion stores, including a decades-old fossilized tooth whorl, which contained remnants of the upper jaw and skull it was once attached to. Through CT scans, the team determined that the whorl was placed in Helicoprion's lower jaw, right in front of the jaw joint, and the creature completely lacked upper teeth. It consistently grew new teeth, with the old ones funneling outward toward the front of the whorl. In other words, the Buzzsaw Shark had a built-in tooth factory. The whorl rotated the teeth backwards like a circular saw as the jaw closed, enabling the shark to attack soft-bodied cephalopods like squid. Helicoprion also wasn't exactly a shark, but close. following one evolutionary branch over from the early shark lineage that split from the shared ancestor between sharks and ratfish. The Bandringa. The Bandringa was a single shark species that lived over 300 million years ago in what is now the upper Midwest of the United States. It's the earliest known migratory animal and the only known shark that migrated from freshwater to saltwater. With a long, spoon-billed snout up to half its body length, the Bandringa didn't look much like a modern shark and perhaps more closely resembled present-day sawfish and paddlefish. Adults grew up to 10 feet long, meaning the Bandringa's snout was up to 5 feet long. For a long time, scientists believed there were two Bandringa species due to the presence of fossils in both fresh and saltwater environments, but a 2014 study proved otherwise. Upon re-examining fossils from 24 Bandringas and 3 different sites, scientists Dr. Lauren Sallin and Dr. Michael Coates concluded that their remains were found in such different places due to their migration habits. The researchers concluded that Bandringas spent most of their adult lives in freshwater habitats, with females traveling south to shallow marine waters to lay eggs. The Bandringa's odd migration pattern is contradictory to that of most modern sharks, who live in the open ocean and travel toward the shore to lay eggs or give birth. Originally a marine creature, the Bandringa shifted to a freshwater habitat while for some reason maintaining its ancestors' sea breeding habits, something no modern shark is known to do. This discovery paved the way for scientists to wonder if migration goes even farther back than the Bandringa's time.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The Siberian pony. In 1968, gold miners who were searching along the Indigirka River in the Russian Republic of Yakutia found something entirely unexpected. They were digging a tunnel beneath the frozen ground in search of valuable mineral deposits when they noticed something sticking through the ceiling. At a depth of around 30 feet, they realized that it looked like legs and a tail, so they called the authorities. A team was sent in from the Zoological Institute in St. Petersburg, who managed to recover a whole body, apart from the head, and were able to identify it as the remains of a Przewalski's horse. Nowadays, the species is only found in Mongolia, but it once had a much larger range. This specimen, known as the Siberian pony, is thought to have been frozen in the ice at some point between 35 and 39,000 years ago. The position the pony was in when it was found suggested it had died quickly after falling into a bog and getting stuck, and it was probably no more than 8 years old when this happened. The miners just happened to find it from below. It was so well preserved that researchers were able to look at the material in its stomach, which included grasses, plants, and herbs from thousands of years ago, which gives us great insight into the flora in the region at the time and the kinds of things the horses like to eat. Fighting moose. In 2016, a teacher from Unalakleet in Alaska was walking with a friend near the camp where they worked when they suddenly saw something strange sticking up from the ice. They went to investigate further and found that what they had seen were the antlers of a moose. Initially thinking it had been shot by a hunter, it soon became apparent that something else had happened because they found a second moose. The discovery was made at the end of the moose rutting season, and the most likely explanation is that these two males were fighting for the affection of a female. Things went horribly wrong for them both, though, and they crashed through the ice into the freezing water. As they were tangled together at the time, there was very little either could have done to escape. They would have died very quickly, and the ice sealed up around their antlers soon after. Yuka bison. The Yuka bison was found in the Yakutia Republic in Russia in 2011, and it's thought to be one of the best mummified steppe bison to have ever been discovered. The species once lived across Europe, Asia, and North America from around 2 million to 10,000 years ago, but are thought to have finally died out during the end of the last ice age due to changing habitats and because of human hunting. They were so prevalent that they were depicted in cave art from the Stone Age and were slightly larger than the bison that live today in North America and had a second hump. This specimen was buried deep in the permafrost and is estimated to have weighed as much as 1,300 pounds and was 5.5 feet tall to the shoulder. It has been dated to around 10,500 years ago and was found in a sleeping position, which would suggest that it died of natural causes. Researchers have taken samples of its DNA to learn how closely related this species was to others, and studies of its stomach have uncovered samples of pollen and other plants, just like the horse, that tell us what was growing at the time. Maybe we can bring some of those plants back. And now for number 7, but first, it's shout-out time! Big thank you to Krish Mehta and Rakes, or Ray X, I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you for your nice comments! If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the Origins Explained family. The Tumat puppy. In 2015, the Tumat puppy was discovered on the bank of the river Salic in the Sakha Republic of Russia, and its remarkable state of preservation sent waves through the scientific community. Thought to be around 12,400 years old, it was found close to the site of another set of canine remains 4 years earlier, and researchers believe they probably came from the same litter. Human remains have also been found nearby, which further suggests that these were domesticated dogs. Our first friends from 12,000 years ago. See? That's a very long friendship. The humans most likely worked on the land and likely died after being caught in a landslide. The puppy was carefully thawed out, and videos were released of the careful procedure needed to clean the dirt from its paws. Despite the fur, teeth, and internal organs being in virtually a perfect state, the real excitement was that its brain was still intact and was the first Pleistocene canine brain to ever be available for study. DNA samples were taken from its remains, and possibly the most controversial thing about the Tumat puppy is that there is a team of researchers who are currently planning on using these samples to bring the long-extinct species back to life. What do you think about having a prehistoric puppy? Let me know in the comments below. Frozen fox. When the landscape and rivers are covered in snow and ice, not every animal manages to stay out of trouble. Just ask the moose. In 2017, a fox in Germany made a fatal mistake and managed to get itself frozen in the waters of the river Danube. It was first spotted by the owner of a local guest house, Franz Steele, who said he saw the fox's back shimmering through the ice. He returned a few days later to see if it was still there, and after seeing the orange fur, decided to cut it free with his chainsaw. This resulted in the remarkable recovery of a block of ice with a fox inside it, and was put on display outside of the guest house for all to see. Steele said it was a way to warn people of the dangers of the icy water. There remain some questions around the true nature of the frozen fox, however, with some questioning how possible it would be for an animal to fall through a crack in the ice and become so fully entombed within it in a matter of days. But the guest house owner swears by his story and said it's actually more common than people realize because the ice freezes over so quickly. There have been several so-called glacier foxes reported every year, and some are pretty creepy. Well, actually, they all are. Foxes like to pounce on things, so when they pounce on thin ice, they break right through. Kolyma woolly rhinoceros. Also known as the Siberian unicorn, woolly rhinoceroses were once present across Eurasia in large numbers, and their remains have been found as far as the UK in the west and the Chukotka Peninsula in the east. Perhaps this is one of the animals that inspired the myths and legends of unicorns present in many societies. Regardless, only a few remains have been found though, and the best example is one that was found in 2007 in the lower Kolyma River at the opening of a gold mine in Yakutia. The rhino was nearly complete and was the first time that a whole body had been found within the permafrost. It was preserved so well in the ice that it was still covered in fur and skin, and the skull was in a perfect state, complete with its 2 horns. Thought to have lived around 39,000 years ago, the female woolly rhino would have weighed as much as 1.5 tons and was ideally adapted to survive in the freezing conditions at the time. It's not entirely certain what caused the species to go extinct, but some researchers have suggested that it happened when temperatures began to rise, and as a result, snow was much deeper than before. The rhino's short legs would have made it difficult to move around easily and migrate, and they probably died because of the inability to find enough food. Siberian cave lions. Cave lions went extinct around 10,000 years ago, but a series of recent discoveries in the Siberian permafrost have allowed researchers to learn far more about them than has been possible before, and has even led some to believe the species could be brought back from extinction one day. Of particular interest were 2 cubs that were originally thought to have been siblings and died around 44,000 years ago. Studies have shown, however, that the female was born 18,000 years after the male that she was found alongside. Very little is known about the male, but the female died around 26,000 years ago, seemingly from starvation. She was extremely skinny, and scans showed that she had no fat on her body, suggesting that at the time there was very little food available. Perhaps her mother went out to hunt and never returned, or was forced to abandon her, leaving the cub with no chance at survival. Her remains, however, were preserved so well that DNA samples have been taken, and some researchers think that they'll be able to create a viable embryo by filling in the pieces with samples taken from African lions. Scientists are just a few steps away from bringing back the Siberian cave lion. Lena the foal. Lena the baby horse was found frozen in the Siberian permafrost in the Batagaika crater, and remarkably, when researchers began to thaw her out, they found that her body still contained blood. At around 42,000 years old, this is the oldest blood ever collected by more than 10,000 years and provided invaluable information about how these animals lived. Usually, over thousands of years, blood dries or coagulates and leaves no more than a powdery residue, but after defrosting, this blood was liquid. 39-inch tall Lena was no more than 2 weeks old when she died. She drowned in a pool of mud, but it was this that kept her so well preserved for so long. Her skin and hair were also almost perfect, and there was even a trace of urine in her bladder. These rare body fluids meant that scientists could study their composition to understand exactly what her physical state was in her short life, and is literally a frozen piece of history for biologists, providing much information about what Pleistocene Siberia was like. Fish. It's not too unusual to see a frozen fish, especially if you're at a fish market, but have you ever seen a fish frozen in the sea? In January of 2014, a series of unbelievable images were captured in a bay of the Norwegian island of Lovund after a cold front had caused temperatures to suddenly plummet. The shoal of herring were swimming very close to the surface and had no warning or chance of escape when the water began to freeze over. Usually, the fish would be able to swim under the ice as it forms, but researchers suspect that they were being herded towards the shore by predators, most likely whales. With nowhere to go, they were frozen mid-swim and left this astonishing sight. Locals noticed increasing interest from seabirds who were trying to figure out how to get to the tempting meal, and once the ice finally thawed, there was a feeding frenzy between them and the whales that swam up from beneath. The Yuka mammoth. Woolly mammoths are the animals we most associate with the Ice Age. I mean, of course, right? And even though they died out when temperatures began to thaw, recent discoveries have led some to believe that they may one day be brought back to life. The most famous frozen mammoth was found in coastal permafrost in Yakutia in 2009. Known as Yuka after the tribe that found her, a large amount of her fur, muscles, and even her trunk were fully preserved. She was no older than 10 when she died, around 39,000 years ago. Her tusks can be seen forming, but there's something else about her remains that have revealed what human life was like at the time. She is covered in cuts and gashes, some of which appear to have been made by human tools, but the others appear to be the result of cave lion attacks. Could this be evidence that people used to hunt large animals like this with the assistance of packs of lions? Or are these wounds the result of multiple unsuccessful attacks before the mammoth fell into the cold water and died? We won't know for sure until further remains with similar markings are found, but with finds like this that are full of recoverable DNA, some are hoping they'll one day be able to create a viable embryo and bring mammoths back to the world. Thanks for watching! If you could bring any of these animals back to life, which one would you pick? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you're new here. See you later! Bye!